Every time a new tier list drops, the FGC goes pretty wild. I mean, obviously, they're game dependent, right? And, it's usual that people feel disrespected or start questioning every little thing on the tier list. Depending on what character you play is obviously, where that person ranks your characters, how you're gonna, depending on what kind of person you are, is how you're gonna respond to the tier list, right? But I think we actually need to ask ourselves, do tier lists actually even matter? Is it ever just completely over if a character is at the bottom or low tier? How much can player skill actually overcome the bad matchups and the faults of the characters? So yeah, I kind of just want to talk about it for a bit. You've had, oh my gosh, so many low tier wins, and I mean, fighting game history, right? I don't even need to go into too many, but we've seen Zangief win in the older Street Fighters. We've seen, like, dude, Faust. We've seen, like, Ino. Well, okay, Ino's a little arguable, but, Ino has been considered low tier, and we've definitely seen Daru go out and do some amazing things on the character, right? But let's talk about what tier lists are even measuring, because I think there's one thing that is people kind of get twisted about tier lists, but let's just kind of talk about it just for a little. Tier list, obviously, the ranking of the character, their overall strength in usually competitive play. Some tier lists can be made for, like, for example, I've seen people do a tier list of tower, right? Or, just tier list of, like, random other little things, maybe like design or whatever. But usually, like, a serious tier list, the one that we're talking about today, is more of a competitive one. This takes into, ranking characters usually is based upon the matchups that they have. If they're a character that does well, especially into the higher echelon of characters, meaning that the more popular tournament characters that you see, how does that character do into those characters, right? If you're playing a character that does well into lower and mid tiers, but they lose to, let's say there's 10 top tier characters and they lose to 7 of them, and those are the most popular tournament characters in the game, then it's probably for the best that that character is not in the higher end of the tier list, right? Or at least the top end. We have to talk about their consistency, what they have, right? If they have good tools, reliable options, especially tournament reliable options. Something that else that can be considered into a tier list when ranking a character for competitive play is how easy they are, right? If a character is extremely executionally difficult, then they could be stronger in competitive play. But in terms of a tournament like style tier list, they're probably not. There might be another character around their strength that could have the slight edge over them, right? Too many one frame links, or just things kind of based on that. That kind of fits into the last thing, like relevancy, like how they fit into the meta. But I kind of just talked about that. I think the thing that people do get misunderstood though is tier list. It's a list based on, or at least for competitive, just overall strength. Look at the character in a box and what they have and everything. You have to assume that tier lists are made if the character is played perfectly, right? Not every player can just go out and, I don't think any player can just go out and play absolutely perfect to an extent, but tier lists are based on top level optimized gameplay. I think that's the biggest thing. Next, I kind of want to just talk about characters in general. Like, I think people need to realize that low tier doesn't always mean unplayable. And I do believe that characters can be pushed beyond their own limits. People, like, for example, Sonic Fox, Leffen, are able to break the idea of a tier list by doing the unexpected, or the what people think couldn't be done on a certain character that is considered lower, right? I know that Leffen has done it in some, I believe it was Fox and Smash. You've had Snake Eyes, I mean, Zangief, right? There's some other, like, wins. Like, my most played game is GGST, but as far as tournament wins with low tiers, we've seen people like 10A be able to get second at, regionals and whatnot. But in terms of major wins, I'm trying to think, any major wins on a absolute super low tier, I would have to I'd have to look. But yeah, you get the point of what I'm trying to say. I think it gets to the point though where these players, or playing people that are playing these characters that are able to win, it's not a matter of just fighting your opponent. It's more playing around the characters. They're fighting the characters' weaknesses, right? They're playing smarter. Obviously, each decision is more well thought out, because you have to. It's how you compensate for the weakness of your character, right? Like, you're not gonna tell me that you're playing like Johnny in GGST, or even the previous version, Zerd, and you're thinking as hard as you need to if you were playing a character like Zato, right? So when do tier lists actually end up mattering? I think that tier lists actually end up mattering when you are competing at the highest level. I think when money and like, you know, all that is on the line, like all eyes are on you, you want to make it to that, you know, final stage. Tier lists do matter because you probably want to be playing a character at the high, like you want to be picking a top tier, right? You don't want to be playing a lower tier character, expecting and, you know, try to do your wildest dreams in a game that just isn't, you know, nice towards your character, right? So yeah, I think that tier lists matter when your character is, like I said, kind of expanding off, you know, the character being bad when they have terrible matchups, right? If you have a character that has like a couple 7-3s or 8-2s, like it's not worth the struggle. Just pick someone else, right? If your character is in a game where, you know, movement is key and they have bad movement, for example, or, you know, they're just not consistent, right? You know, even like, for example, at tournament, like if your character already has to work hard on top of having like a lower damage output, then it's probably not for the best unless they really, really have something going for them that can make them pop up into the meta. For most players, I truly do believe that the gap or the difference between the S tier and the like lower end or even the mid tier isn't as wild as you think. I truly think this only counts if your character is just truly just trash. Like universally, he's just not good. But even then, I think you can still make something work. Unless, again, it's to that, like, higher, very high level. And then I think that there's still one more, like, thing to be hopeful about is obviously there's patches with tier, like, you know, and then obviously new tier lists come. Or, you know, maybe not even tier lists, but maybe a character gets more discovered, for example. For example, in Granblue, 2B on release was considered terrible, bottom 3, bottom 1, and then people found out that the character was broken and she was like top 5, right? I know at the start of Strive that some people thought that maybe Leo wasn't as good as he thought, and then he was like a top, like, you know, people were like, oh, this character's broken. Same with Nago, right? Same with, I'm not gonna say, Zato was considered very weak on release, and he wasn't like the greatest, but he was, considering where the strength that for the game was, he was actually pretty strong, I do believe. We have characters like, and then you have the characters that are more very, very complex. Like, for example, Asuka in GGST, right? Very, very undiscovered, but we found out the character was broken. There's Gold Lewis as well, right? It takes time for characters to develop, and eventually new tech does get discovered, like I said. So, and then obviously, like I said earlier, you have the patch, right? You know, developers constantly tweaking the balance. So, like, your low tier could be the next, like, you know, Evo winner. You know, we have had characters that have just shot up, and I keep referring to GGST, but I'm pretty sure if you're watching this, you can kind of translate what I'm saying to your own game and a character that relates to it. But for GGST, we've had Sin, we've had Elfelt, you know, character Anji, Faust, right? Even though Faust isn't as strong as those other characters, he is, oh my, a completely different character from what he was on release, dude. And then obviously you have characters that drop. You know, you've had Chip in GGST, you've had Zato, right? Yeah, I know that in like Street Fighter, you've had JP, right? I believe Akuma's still really strong. Chun-Li, I believe she's weak. It's been a minute since my Street Fighter 6 days, or just Street Fighter days in general, I'm not gonna lie. But anyways, and I think the last thing I want to talk about is whether or not you should care about tier lists. I kind of talked about it briefly before, but if you're playing for fun, then no. Play whoever you like, and don't let tier lists affect you at all. I think if you're just someone getting new to the game, maybe doing combo trials or whatever, and you know, you want to maybe play the game just with friends and whatnot, play who you like. Look at the designs, let that be the deciding factor for who you play, right? Whether it's the character's voice actor, whether it's the character's clothing, whether it's the way they stand, the weapon they use, the name of their moves, whatever attracts you to the character, let that be the reason you play them, right? If you're serious about competing, then kinda. You have to be realistic with yourself and know how good you are at like fighting games or just the game in general. If you're to the point where you just want to be a player that can enter a tournament from time to time, or, you know, let's say you want to play the rank system and be able to get like a certain rank, then, you know, then kinda, right? I think it's important, like I said, to know the strengths and weaknesses, but don't let that stop you from improving. I truly do believe that at this point, you don't need to value tier list to the like extreme. If you want to go pro though, like you want to be that guy, I said this earlier, you should probably pick a good character. Unless like the only exception is if you know you're like the GOAT, like you're the next Daigo and you can just make it work. At the end of the day, tier lists are just a tool. They're not a law. It's not something you have to abide by. It's not, you don't have to value them. They're just things that are put around for fun that can be helpful depending on where you are with the game. And even if you don't play the game, maybe if you just like discuss your opinions, and again, they're for fun, ultimately, right? Pick who you want and try to push them as far as you can, and then figure out where you are with the game, and then you can make the switches and adjustments at that area. I think it could be cool if you're the type of person that, wants to prove the tier list wrong. Be that person. But yeah, that's it for me. I want to hear in the comments, maybe do you think tier lists matter? Are they overrated? Are they needed? And maybe if you've ever played a lower tier character and have made it work. And again, when I say make it work, I'm not talking at the top level, Sonic Fox level. I'm more speaking of in your own world, right? Have you ever fought someone that has played a better character and beat them with your lower character, whether it's in ranked or a friend, or maybe even a small tournament that has 5 people? Right? I don't think we need to have everyone soar and be like, Sonic Foxes and, Leffins and whatnot. I think we can live in our own world. So I'm curious to hear what everyone else has to say. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and God bless. Join the Discord if you're interested. Link will be in the comments in the description. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching. Much love. Like I said, God bless, and have a good rest of your day.